without further ado, we have to go now. Let's go to the Trump block. We're going to learn about Trump's new strategy with this guy called Elon Musk. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's some guy. So anyway, it's supposed to make a difference. They're going to do some sort of like audit of the government and get rid of unnecessary tyranny and laws and regulations. We'll see what happens. But anyway, the claims are there. We'll examine them and put them in the time capsule. And then we're going to look at Donald Trump's hush money sentencing, delayed till after the election. And then you're going to hear what MSNBC tells its viewers, that it's all part of their strategy because they want to put him in prison. And if you did it before the election, people would get too upset. So they have a whole line of rhetoric we can untangle afterwards. But I just wanted to let you know where we're going. We're starting out with liberal hive mind. We're going to the BBC, and then we'll end up over at MSNBC. And we'll probably have to call a friend to tow us out of that situation because they got some broken axle thinking over there. All right, let's get to the liberal hive mind. Let's see Elon and Trump.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it's freaking Christmas. Now obviously there's something very interesting going on here. It seems like there's a fight between both candidates to drop as many interesting policy stances and promises as possible before the debate, and when comparing the two I'm noticing a clear distinction. You know, Kamala Harris a lot of the times is just piggybacking off of Donald Trump, or she's announcing policies that frankly make no sense, or are just dumbed down versions or light versions of things they've previously announced before. You know, something along the lines as Kamala Harris walks in the room and says, "Good news, everyone! I'm going to increase your capital gains taxes by 15%. You know, whatever. The Kamala Harris promises have been pretty cruddy. And meanwhile, on the other side, like I just said earlier, it feels like it's frickin' Christmas season. Donald Trump's making some serious promises here, and they're not just empty pandering, vote-grabbing BS promises like, I'm going to give you a subsidy to buy a home, which is going to cause further housing inflation. It's not just stimmy checks, it's not just bogus promises of free this, free that, student loan tuition. No, he's talking about some real stuff, some important things that a huge majority of the country wants. And the first thing is finally Donald Trump agrees to partner up with Elon Musk in the launching of a government efficiency department. Folks, this is huge. This is arguably the biggest announcement of the campaign, and it's not even the only one. Let's have a conversation about it. This right here, this is good policy. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright guys, so I laid down the groundwork in the intro. Now let's go to the Economic Club of New York, where Donald Trump was a keynote speaker, and he had this to say.
Fourth, at the suggestion of Elon Musk, who has given me his complete and total endorsement. That's nice, 'cause he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. It's very, very much appreciated. I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms. We need to do it. Can't go on the way we are now. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force. Be interesting. If he has the time, that'll be a good one to do it, but he's agreed to do it.
Let's frickin' go, folks. It initially started when Donald Trump sat down with Elon Musk in a Twitter space, and Elon mentioned the idea.
Well, I think it would be great to just have a government efficiency commission that takes a look at these things and just ensures that the taxpayer money, the taxpayers' hard-earned money, is spent in a good way. And I'd be happy to help out on such a commission.
I'd love it
if it were formed.
Well, you're the greatest cutter. I mean, I look at what you do. You walk in and you just say, "You want to quit?" They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike, and you say, "That's okay. You're all gone. You're all gone." So every one of you is gone, and you are the greatest. You would be very good. Oh, you would love it.
Initially, Trump seemed open to the concept, and I remember my reaction to that clip. I was just hopeful that this was going to happen. Throughout Trump's history as a leader, he's always been open to good ideas. He likes to surround himself by impressive people, and he likes to take their consultation. You know, like we mentioned, that was one of his downfalls during the first 4 years of his first term, where he surrounded himself with a bunch of experienced political people. That was a mistake, because of course we all know the typical political typical charlatan archetype, but it seems like Trump has learned and he's now surrounding himself by amazing, effective people, and he's talking about doing things that so desperately need to be done. There should be a government efficiency department in every single government, because what ends up happening over time is this sort of onion layering effect. Government over decades and decades and decades builds more and does more. I mean, it naturally expands and becomes bigger. Government rarely contracts. And eventually you get to a point where there's so much bloat, so much useless crap happening, stuff that's outdated. Or in many cases, you got too much bureaucracy, too much paper pushing, and not enough action. And so things end up being drawn out, too expensive, and in the worst cases, useless. And obviously that's happening in the American governmental system. And so maybe, I don't know, just maybe it's time, especially when facing a catastrophic level of national debt, it's probably time to start trying to find efficiencies. An individual by the name of Blake Hall tweeted this: "The Government Accountability Office estimates that the federal government loses between $233 billion to $521 billion annually to fraud based on data from 2018 to 2022. That's roughly 2% of America's GDP stolen every year, $1 trillion lost for those years." Elon Musk then responds, "Your tax dollars are being wasted to a degree that is hard to comprehend. An aircraft carrier costs $13 billion. America could have bought a new Navy to better defend the country, upgraded our highways, or any one of number of great things. Instead, we got fraud." You know, it's time for an audit. The government sure does love auditing the people. Joe Biden hired a whole lot of IRS agents, I think 87,000 extra ones, to audit you guys and your $600 transactions on PayPal and Venmo. You know, they'll certainly audit you, but the people apparently can never audit them. Well, it's time for that to change. You know, it's time to maybe tighten the belt a little bit. It's time to stop with the irresponsible spending. And now, of course, we have these economic think tanks that are supposedly bipartisan and leftoids pushing this narrative.
Go ahead. Yeah, totally. We have excellent counters of all political persuasions, but we also do have nonpartisan groups like the Penn Wharton group that put out their budget model and said that Donald Trump would take the deficit $5.8 trillion she'd only add $1.2 trillion. You had Goldman Sachs that came out today, and they said that the GDP will significantly decrease under Donald Trump and it'll continue to increase under Kamala Harris. Look at what Moody's has said, also nonpartisan, talking about how if you're going to round up a bunch of immigrants and you're going to have tariffs, which he keeps saying isn't a tax on consumers, and that's what the national tax is that people are talking about, if you're going to implement tariffs, guess what's going to happen? The economy is going to suffer for it. That's not what Kamala Harris is proposing.
Supposedly, Donald Trump's budget model is going to add more to the deficit than Kamala Harris's would. I wonder how they got to that conclusion. Of course, it's a completely flawed analysis. Take all this post-pandemic level of spending, continue all this spending in all of these programs, which is the Kamala plan, continue to spend more than the country can afford, increasing the debt over the next 10 years. I think the number is by $16 trillion. That's their plan, but Donald Trump wants to cut taxes, which obviously would increase the deficit because the government is still spending the same amount of money, but they're collecting less in tax revenue. That's the way they're doing their arithmetic. But obviously that makes no sense because if you're going to reduce taxes, you're already expecting less taxes to be coming in. Therefore, what do you got to do? You need to now rebudget, realign, and spend less money. Find efficiencies. Start cutting things. You know, nobody in their analysis is accounting for that. The assumption is that this level of government spending is just the new norm and it's going to continue. In fact, it's going to increase with time. A totally absurd notion. It's like I always say, these people rely on a dumbed down populace that doesn't understand basic concepts. As if the Republican candidate looking to reduce spending, balance the budget, lower taxes, that's the guy who's going to be bad for the economy and that's the guy who's going to extend the deficit even further. It's completely absurd. Democrats talk a big game these days about being responsible on reducing the deficit, but what they mean by that is not generating growth to have all this excess to be able to slowly chip away at the debt as you reduce the size of government and spend less and be more responsible. No, they just want to tax productive, successful people into oblivion to pay for their money laundering schemes. It is time for government efficiency programs to come in and truly analyze for spending efficiencies. It's high frickin' time that a politician makes this sort of promise, and it's coming from the mouth of Donald Trump, so you know that it's packing substance and you know that it's real. I gotta say, I'm impressed. We got promises coming out of both sides. But what's coming out of the left is complete crap, and this is big, this is based. And it goes even beyond that. Donald Trump also makes another announcement. Now, this one, of course, a little bit more controversial. I know many conservative-minded people haven't embraced this one yet, but now Donald Trump is coming out publicly supporting the decriminalization of the personal use of cannabis. Personally, I have more of a libertarian view on this. In my younger years, I indulged a little bit. In fact, I don't know too many people who didn't, but personally, as I've gotten older, I've moved away from it, and it's not really something I want ruling my life. I don't view it as a good thing to really be dependent on any mind-altering substance, but the idea that we should be criminalizing the act, the idea that we should be spending resources going after people for simple possession or for indulging in this natural plant that we literally have brain receptors for, it's just not really on my top priority list. I don't think it's good policy. I think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think it only benefits criminal organizations who are selling the stuff in the black market. It's totally unregulated. We keep hearing that people, young people in many cases, are getting hit with fentanyl poisoning when they're buying stuff off the street. Honestly, I see a whole lot of net benefit. I think it should be decriminalized, frankly. I think it should be legalized. And now Donald Trump seems to be on board, and that's yet again another massive, courageous stance that I think the majority of the American populace is going to agree with. Trump has made two huge campaign promises here that are both issues, in my view, that have bipartisan support, and frankly, two things that only a courageous politician who's not beholden to special interest groups would have the balls to promise publicly. It's absolutely based and could very easily start to change people's minds. I'm all for it, and that's the update. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for
We're going to New York now because a judge has just announced that he's postponed the sentencing of the former US President Donald Trump on paying hush money to an adult film star. John Sudworth is in New York with the latest for us now. John.
Well, Sophie, Donald Trump has been trying numerous methods to delay or completely annul his criminal prosecution and his sentencing for it back in May earlier this year. His attempts to get the case thrown out because of the recent Supreme Court ruling that granted broad immunity to presidents was so far unsuccessful. Of course, these payments to Stormy Daniels, the former porn star, took place before he was elected in 2016. But the decision today in the Manhattan court is a significant one. The judge has granted his motion to delay sentencing for those hush money payments until after the election, as you say. He said that this is to avoid the appearance, however unwarranted, that it might have a bearing on the election. But of course, Sophie, it raises other questions. It means that the US public, that voters will go into this election not knowing whether or not Donald Trump will be given a fine for these crimes or potentially, although thought by many to be unlikely, a custodial sentence.
John Sudworth with that breaking news from New York.
Joining me now are Duncan Levin, former prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office, and Christy Greenberg, former federal prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. Duncan, can you take me inside the sort of mind of Judge Merchan to the degree that you are able to professionally and sort of explain to those of us who don't understand the back and forth what a sentencing hearing is?
Sure.
And why Judge Merchan thinks that those proceedings could inadvertently intersect with the political proceedings of a November election?
Well, so a sentencing proceeding basically is the opportunity for the prosecution to make basically oral arguments, for the defense also, and for the defendant to get to talk, because throughout this whole trial, he had the right to testify, but he didn't. This is his moment to talk, and he gets to make a statement to the court and express remorse or not, and I don't think he will, but he's allowed to talk to the court.
Something tells you?
Something tells me. And so he's allowed to talk, and then the judge is going to pronounce sentence orally, and it's being done very formally in this case. Sometimes in state court it's not. But there are a lot of swirling things here going on for Judge Merchan, and I think that a lot of people have been saying this is a huge win for Trump, but I think it's anything but. It looks like the noose is tightening in a way, because if he loses the election, this makes it far more likely that he's going to get some kind of sentence with confinement on it. And I know I've been talking to you for the whole summer, sort of off stage, about the fact that I think that that's going to happen, but I think this makes it much more likely because Judge Merchan's in a very difficult position to put him even in house arrest during the final stages of the election. Once the election's over, if he loses, if he wins the election, all bets are off.
Right.
If he loses the election, election, I think it makes it much more likely to do that. But there are also other appellate issues going on right now. And Mr. Trump has a 330-10 motion, which is a motion to set aside the verdict. There are appellate issues.
We're going to talk it, but just to clarify what you're saying here, you think Merchan is ready to hand down a sentence with some kind of confinement, either in home confinement or a jail cell, or some kind of sentencing that's severe enough that that's actually the reason he doesn't want to hand down the sentence before the November election?
It's hard to tell and nobody knows, but I'm not willing to put money on it, but I'm willing to say
You're saying it on national television.
I'm willing to say the odds of it are going way up, because once the election's over, it makes it much easier for the judge to do it. And I think that this is a case that...
Assuming that Trump hasn't won the election.
Assuming Trump hasn't won the election. If he does, I think that it'll very likely get up to the Supreme Court and could get stayed. But if he loses the election, the prosecution is going to be asking for some kind of incarceration, home confinement, some split sentence with probation. I'm going to be very surprised if they don't. And this just makes it way easier for the judge to impose that kind of a sentence on him if it's taking place after the election.
Christy, the DA's office didn't fight to make a case that this hearing should not be postponed. And Judge Merchan sort of called them out about that. And you're more than called. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the prosecution and the judge and how this decision was made?
Yeah, so, generally speaking, a judge is not going to keep a sentencing date that both sides say they want moved. And so Trump says we want the delay, shocker. But then the Manhattan DA's office put in a submission that was curious. They said, we take no position, which it's your case as a prosecutor. You take positions on these kinds of things. They say we take no position, but then they basically say, Trump's reasons here about why they want it delayed, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then didn't really elaborate on the reasons why it wouldn't make sense. So in effect, Judge Merchan in his order is calling them out and saying, you're really joining Trump's delay request.
Right.
You say
no
or not
argument is basically a co-sign.
Yeah, you're co-signing this, and therefore, with both of you on that side, made his job a lot more harder. They kind of forced his hand here. So I'm not necessarily surprised he made this decision. I don't necessarily agree. I'm more in the Judge Chutkan camp of the election should not matter. Your case schedule is your case schedule. But again, I think if the Manhattan DA's office had opposed this delay request from Trump, I think Merchan would have kept it. Because remember, Judge Merchan knew about the SCOTUS decision. He knew about the election date. He knows they made this motion. And even after Trump made that motion to set aside the verdict based on immunity, he kept the schedule for September 18th and told the parties, you better be ready. Only now that both sides seem to be saying move it, did he change his mind?
Well, listen, it's so high stakes for everyone involved, right? And you got to think that, if you're the judge out on a limb here that's having to make a huge call, not just for this case, but for American history, and you're getting death threats, and your daughter's getting death threats, and your court clerks are getting death threats, and you're the subject of national ire on the right, you would assume you need the DA's office to at least back you up in terms of expediting this. So do you think that figured into his decision-making here?
I think you could see it in the tone of his decision. He was clearly upset that the DA's office was putting this all on him. And I understand why. They've been getting these death threats. They're scared. That's got to be part of it. But the amount of resources they have spent on this case, this is their case. They should be pushing for jail time. And they may say, look, don't impose the jail time until after the election. That's fine with us, but go ahead with the sentencing. That's on them. And they're basically dumping it on the judge and putting it all on him. And that's really not fair to him. And you could see it in his tone. He was clearly upset with that.
What do you make of the discrepancy, just completely?
Yeah. The problem is Bill Clinton did the same thing, had to pay a lot more, didn't go to jail, didn't go to prison, didn't suffer any consequences, now come to think of it. So what's the one-sidedness with the Trump case? This is Stormy Daniels, again, not a porn star, adult film actress at best, not a star of anything. But he paid her some money through Michael Cohen, who's a dirty bird and stole money from Trump during the process. The whole thing is straight out of daytime soap opera land. But among the soap operas, it's a lot better than the Tim and Kamala show. So Scott, did you have thoughts on the lawfare that continues to be waged against former President Donald J. Trump?
I mean, it's just the same thing we talked about earlier. It's just on its face. Just it shouldn't even be an issue at all. Like, I mean, maybe like it's at least it shouldn't be national big news. It's like God, it's just so obvious that it's just a direct attack against him and his character to affect the election. That's all it is. That's all it literally is. And it's interesting that one commentator, or that whatever the spokesperson for the Department of Justice, was saying how it's actually had the reverse effect. So, I mean, I guess more power to him. I mean, I don't know, dude. I don't even know if I want Trump in, dude. I'm like, I'm preparing for another 4 years of Kamala. Like, let's wake everybody up, dude. Let's get Kamala in and wake everybody up, dude. I'm down with that. Either way,
where are we in 4 years, man? I don't know.
I know. I'm just kidding.
4 years can be really, really long.
I know, but dude, I mean, think about the last 4 years though. We got like bump stocks back. We got freaking, it's like,
hey, 4 years can be really long. Like we started this podcast when Biden got elected, so it's been 4 years.
You see, you've been crushing your life's gotten better, man, since Biden got in. My life's gotten better since Biden got in. Like, I'm being facetious here, but it's like, dude, I don't know.
For the transcript, he was being sarcastic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm being, but also, I'm just mentally preparing myself. Either way, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy either way, dude.
Focus, draw your focus, pull yourself together. They're coming. Both barrels, apparently. Oh, yeah. So, wait, that's a bad pun, because the next story is the Georgia.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false. This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.